I'm Harper, and I've never been the type to turn away from love stories where the guy sweeps the girl off her feet. So when Aaron showed up, with all his sweet texts in the morning and calls at night asking about my day, I fell hard. It's almost laughable how quick I was to think, this is it. This is love. My friends, they'd look at us and say we were cut from the same cloth, meant to be. But there was Grandma June, with her head full of wisdom and a lifetime of watching seasons change. She'd always say, Harper, honey, watch the signs. When a man wants all your time, there's a chance he's not just in love. Could be he's trying to own you. I would laugh it off. Nana with her old-timey ideas about men and their ways. Aaron was different, or so I believed. There we were, on an evening that felt like every other evening we'd spent together. Sitting on my worn-out couch, he held my hand a little too tight when he asked about my day. Met anyone interesting at work today? He asked. I'd tell him about the regulars, skipping over the mundane bits. It's the same folks every day, you know that. And no one knew? No one took an interest in you? His tone was casual, but his grip wasn't. Just the usual. Why so curious? I tried to pull my hand away lightly, trying to lighten the mood. Just making sure we're good, that's all, he replied, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. We were drifting with the TV chattering in the background, filling the silence. It was the same subtle pressure I'd felt countless times before but always managed to brush aside. It was then Grandma June's words crept back, making my heart sink a bit. There's a fine line. A warning I never really heeded. The night dragged on. We sat together, but my mind was miles away, tangled in Grandma June's warnings and this knot in my stomach that just wouldn't loosen up. When Aaron left, he took part of my peace with him. Locking the door behind him, I leaned back and let out the breath I'd been holding. I was alone with the silence of my apartment and the whispers of doubt that echoed louder in the space he'd vacated. I thought about calling Grandma June, but it was late, and this was my mess to figure out. As the digital clock on the microwave blinked to the rhythm of my unease, I realized that there's a thin line, all right, between love and a cage. And I was the one who ignored the signs, thinking they were roses instead of the red flags they really were. Aaron and I had said I do, and we started our married life in my little home cloaked in ivy. But after we settled in, things began to change. One night we were sitting on our porch, the air was filled with the scent of the nearby pine trees. Aaron's hand was resting on mine, a bit too firmly, and his voice cut through the calm as he asked, "Who's that new guy working with you?" "Oh, that's just Peter. He's in the marketing department," I replied, trying to sound as neutral as possible. He hummed, and I could see that familiar tension in his jaw. I knew that look, it was the same one he had when he thought something wasn't quite right. Over time, Aaron's questions weren't just questions anymore. They were like probes, digging for something he seemed convinced he'd find. Then he started on my clothes. It was a Sunday morning, and I was picking out a dress for brunch with friends. "That one's pretty," he said, nodding toward a neutral-toned dress. I was thinking of wearing the blue one. "It's more cheerful," I suggested, holding up my favorite dress, the one that made my eyes shine a little brighter. He shook his head. "You'd stand out too much. Wear the other one," he insisted, and it wasn't a suggestion. "But Aaron, it's just a dress," I said, trying to keep the peace. "Just trust me on this, Harper. I'm looking out for you," he said, but it didn't feel like looking out. It felt like locking up. His preferences spilled over from my wardrobe to our social life. Dinners with friends became less frequent, my phone buzzed less, and it wasn't long before those invites stopped coming in altogether. One evening, he flopped down on the couch next to me, a scowl on his face. "Mark called. Wants us to meet them for drinks next Saturday." "Told him we're busy," he said, reaching for the remote. "We are?" I asked, surprised. I hadn't seen Mark and Laura in weeks. They were our couple friends, the ones we used to double date with regularly. Aaron flicked through the channels, not meeting my eye. "We don't need to spend time with them so much." You've got me, and I've got you. That's enough, isn't it? I paused, the words catching in my throat. I should have argued, reminded him that we were our own people, but a part of me was too tired to fight over something I knew I couldn't win. That's enough, I echoed, but it sounded like I was trying to convince myself. This was my life now, a life where what I wore and who I spoke to became territories Aaron felt entitled to claim. And every time I'd let it go, he'd take a little more. I was losing bits of myself, and it wasn't until I came across an old photo of myself laughing with friends that I realized just how much had been chipped away. I looked at the woman in that picture and wondered where her smile had gone. The thing about life is, it's far messier than you'd expect, especially when love ties you down instead of setting you free. That's what it felt like with Aaron lately. Our love felt like walls closing in, disguised as just another part of married life. His new habit? Showing up at my office out of the blue, turning up like he owned the place, and, in a way, like he owned me too. Just in the neighborhood, was his usual line, followed by a too bright smile. One evening at home, I decided to wear my favorite pencil skirt to work the next day. Aaron came into the room, his face twisted up in a way that made me brace myself. "Why do you need to wear that?" he barked, his temper flaring over nothing. "It's just a skirt, Aaron," I said, keeping my voice steady. I didn't want to fight, not again. He didn't buy it. "It's not just anything. Who are you dressing for, huh?" His voice was a sharp jab, his suspicion naked and unashamed. "I dress for myself, Aaron. Since when is that a crime?" I tried to defend my choice, my independence, but even to my ears, I sounded like I was reaching. The next morning rolled around, and my skirt, the one I had planned to wear, was gone. Not just that one, but half of my wardrobe seemed to have just vanished. Panic surged through me, a cold wave that made me dizzy. I found Aaron in the kitchen, his back to me, making coffee like it was any other day. "Where are my clothes, Aaron?" I demanded, my voice edged with fear and anger, a cocktail of emotions that made me sound more like a stranger than a wife. "They weren't appropriate. I did us both a favor," he said, his voice oddly calm, like he was talking about the weather, not my personal belongings. "A favor? By deciding what I can and cannot wear? Are you listening to yourself?" I couldn't hide the shock in my voice, the disbelief that this was my reality. "It's for the best, Harper. You'll thank me later," he replied, and the way he said it, like he knew better, made my skin crawl. I was halfway into the FMLA form when the mask slipped, and Aaron's concern showed its true face: control. My independence, my choices, he was whittling them down, trying to reshape me into something smaller, more contained. Something less me. As I sat at the kitchen table, his words echoing around the silent room, I realized my once warm and loving home had turned into something else. It wasn't safe or comforting. It was a beautifully decorated prison, and the man I married was the warden. The rest of the day passed in a blur. At work, I was a ghost, going through motions, smiling when necessary, but underneath, a storm was raging. I spent hours at my desk, looking at the family pictures on my phone, the ones where Aaron looked like the perfect husband. Now, they just felt like scenes from a different woman's life. That evening, I sat in the car outside the house for a long time, the engine humming softly. Stepping through that door took a strength I wasn't sure I had, because inside that house waited a life that was slowly suffocating me. The door creaked as I finally turned the key and stepped inside. The smell of dinner hit me, and there was Aaron, all smiles and kisses, acting like today was just another day. But it wasn't, and the sad thing was, I wasn't sure if tomorrow would be any different. At work, Mr. Jacobs, my boss, dropped a fat file on my desk. "Got a new project for you, Harper. It's going to need some late nights, but you're the best for the job." "Pleasure's all mine, Mr. Jacobs." I managed a smile, ignoring the sinking feeling in my stomach. At dinner, I broke the news. Aaron's fork clattered against his plate, his eyes narrowing to slits. "You'll quit?" he demanded, words sharp and clear. "Aaron, quitting isn't as easy as you make it sound. I'm good at what I do, and yes, we do need the money, I reminded him, hoping some sense would seep into the conversation. But his fists balled up on the table, his anger as clear as day. "No wife of mine will slave away for some boss's whims," he almost yelled. It was right then that his mother, Evelyn, appeared, like a ghost at our table. Always on cue, always trembling with some kind of worry. "Harper, honey," she started, hands flitting like nervous birds, "can't you just ease up a bit?" For Aaron. It wasn't right. None of it. But I loved him once, and I guess a part of me still clung to that. So I pitched the middle ground. "How about a compromise? I'll work from home. Best of both worlds, right?" Aaron slumped back, the lines on his face smoothing out. "Fine," he muttered, almost sulking, "but no late nights." Evelyn smiled, relieved, her pale eyes finding mine, a silent thank you. But me? I felt boxed in, the walls painted by Aaron's temper and framed by Evelyn's worry. As the days turned into weeks, my home office became my world. Aaron's occasional peeks over my shoulder, Evelyn's mid-afternoon calls to check in, or to check up, hard to tell, made sure my leash was short. Work was hectic, enough to keep my mind from wandering to dark places. Mr. Jacobs was a tough old bird, but fair. "You're holding up the fort, Harper," he said in one of our phone check-ins, his voice crackly but kind. "Keep it up." I remember one evening, the sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of tired blue. Aaron sat on the couch, remote in hand, flipping channels without really watching anything. I closed my laptop, my brain fried from hours of numbers and emails. "Work's done for now," I told him, my voice a weekday kind of tired. He grunted, a noise that wasn't yes or no, just Aaron for, "I heard you." I joined him on the couch, the cushion sinking under me, weary like my bones. "Out of the blue," he said, "you been talking to Jacobs a lot." "About work, yes. It's work, Aaron," I said, keeping my eyes on the TV, not wanting to start another row. He hummed, that old familiar sound of gears grinding in his head. That's life with Aaron, where my love's blindfold only got tighter, and every step forward felt like 2 steps back. The woman in the mirror started to look like a stranger, her eyes holding questions I was scared to answer. One day I needed a ride and Grandma's place was too far to walk, so I grabbed a taxi. The driver was just some regular guy doing his job. Dropped me off at my place, and that should have been that. Except it wasn't. Aaron was out front waiting, and the sight of me stepping out of the taxi set him off big time. The driver had barely handed me my change before Aaron was on him. "What's going on here, huh?" Aaron snapped, eyes bulging. "Who's this?" "Chill out, Aaron, he's just a taxi driver," I tried to cut in, but Aaron wasn't having it. The driver, seeing trouble, didn't waste a second. Put the car in gear and took off. Smart man. Once we were inside, Aaron was still fuming. He paced back and forth, throwing accusing glances my way. I sighed, not up for the drama. "Really, Aaron? You're freaking out over nothing." "It's not nothing. Who knows what you were doing in there?" Aaron's voice boomed through the small space of our entryway. I rolled my eyes. "Get over yourself." Things settled down after that, but not for long. Couple days later, I caught Aaron snooping through my phone while I was making dinner. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" I barked, snatching the phone from his hands. "I was just..." He trailed off, looking like a kid who got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Do you mind telling me what's so interesting in my phone? I was getting really tired of this." Aaron rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. "I don't know. I guess I was just checking on you. Making sure you're not hiding anything." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Checking on me? Are you for real right now? You think that's okay?" He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "I'm sorry, all right? I'm sorry. Won't happen again." "You're right, it won't happen again because this is ridiculous. You're acting like a crazy person." My patience was wearing thin. "Look," I said, "I'm sorry, I screwed up. Forgive me, okay?" His voice had softened now. He looked like he meant it. I let out a deep breath. I was angry, sure, but not enough to throw everything away, not yet. Fine. But this is it, Aaron. No more acting like a jealous kid. You got to get it together. He nodded, a little too eager. Yeah, of course. I will. I promise. We left it at that. I wanted to believe things would get better. Part of me knew it was a long shot, but I still had hope. I guess that's how it goes sometimes. You see red flags, warning signs, but you just keep driving past them, hoping you'll somehow end up on a different road. It all started one crisp morning when I noticed a car. A nondescript, dark sedan, a little too clean, a little too still. I saw it from my kitchen window, parked on the next street over. No big deal, I thought, it's probably just visiting somebody. But then I saw it again by the grocery store, just sitting a couple of aisles over in the parking lot. And again near the dry cleaner. Same car, same place, like a bad penny that kept turning up. A week of this, and I couldn't brush it off any longer. I needed to know. So on a day when the car tailed me to the local library, I took a detour on my way home. Sure enough, the car was still there, matching my turns, keeping its distance, but always present. When I parked on a side street, the sedan stopped a little way behind me. This was no coincidence. It's funny how your mind doesn't want to believe something's wrong, even when it's staring you in the face. It seemed so stupid, so out of a cheap detective show, but there it was. My heart was racing, a mix of fear and anger bubbling up inside me. I picked up my phone and called the police. I think I'm being followed, I whispered, as though the guy behind me could hear. The police took it seriously. They arrived quickly, talked to the man in the car, and checked his ID. Within minutes, they confirmed my fears. The guy was a private detective, and yep, he was following me. Following me on my husband's dime. I was shaking when I got home, with the police report clutched in my hand. Aaron was there, lounging on the sofa like any other evening, blissfully unaware that his little game was up. Aaron, I yelled, throwing the door open wider than I intended. What the hell is this? He jumped up, startled, his eyes doing that darting thing they do when he's on the back foot. Harper, A private detective, Aaron? I could barely get the words out, my voice was shaking so hard. You have me followed? He started stuttering some excuse, his face flushed and guilty looking. Don't. Just don't. I stopped him, holding up a hand. I couldn't bear to hear any lie he might conjure. You know what? I can't do this. My voice broke, but I pulled myself together. You need to leave, Aaron. His mouth snapped shut. He looked like he might argue, but then he didn't. He just grabbed his coat and left without another word. I was alone, truly alone, and for the first time in years, that didn't scare me. It felt like the only honest thing I'd had in a long time. That day had a weird start to begin with. I was still adjusting to a quieter house since I told Aaron to pack his stuff and leave. The man was many things, but quiet wasn't one of them. The peace was nice, but I got to say, a bit eerie too. And then there's a knock at my door that broke the silence like a dropped plate. Standing there was Mr. Freeman, Aaron's boss. Medium height, always looked like he starched his face along with his shirts. Never really liked him, but today he showed up holding a folder stuffed with papers. He's not here, I said before he could step inside. Mr. Freeman frowned, probably not used to doors not swinging wide for him. I've got some important documents for him. Work stuff. I sighed. If Aaron had $1 for every time he was important, we'd be living in a mansion. Well, he's not here. Can I give them to him when he comes back? Mr. Freeman considered it, then nodded. I suppose. Can I come in for a moment? I've been driving for hours. Guess his car was as fancy as his suit, all black and shiny out there. But sure, I thought, why not? I ushered him inside and waved at the kitchen. Take a seat. You want some tea? He plumped down like a sack of flour, weary from the road or life, hard to tell. Tea would be good, thank you, Harper. I put the kettle on and scooped some leaves into the pot. Professional habit. I used to like playing the good hostess. That's when I saw it through the kitchen window, flames dancing around Mr. Freeman's car like it was celebrating something. I shoved Mr. Freeman's tea towards him, half made. Your car. We bolted outside. And there was Aaron, my estranged husband, smiling like it was his birthday, and someone brought him a surprise cake. The crazy in his eyes glinted like the flames. Mr. Freeman blurted out, "My car. What the hell is happening?" Aaron turned towards us, his smile flickering. Hey, Harper. This is for stealing my life. Say hello to your lover. His words slurred with satisfaction, mixed with a decent dose of lunacy. He thought he was getting back at some imagined lover of mine. Mr. Freeman stood frozen, his face shifting from confusion to anger. Aaron, did you do this? Aaron's smile slid off his face faster than ice cream on a hot day when he finally put two and two together. His boss. His wife. His mistake. Boss, I didn't know. Mr. Freeman cut through it all. You set my car on fire thinking it belonged to whom? God, Aaron. I had the contract renewal papers with me. Consider them and your job ashes now. You're done. Aaron fell to his knees quicker than a sack of those same papers, groveling like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Please, Mr. Freeman, I just... Save it. Mr. Freeman's voice was ice. I'm calling the police. The sirens didn't take long. The street filled up like a blocked sink, neighbors, cops, a few pointing phones like we were the evening's cheap entertainment. As the cops slapped cuffs around Aaron's wrists, his knees still dusty from the driveway, I felt 100 weights lifting off me. One fire down, the rest of the mess to clean up. Mr. Freeman just shook his head, looking at what used to be a car. Last I saw of Aaron was him trying to look at me over his shoulder, eyes all rabbit-like with panic. Stepping into my living room felt strange. The whole mess with Aaron was coming to a close. The divorce papers had been filed, and I told him to stay away. He obviously didn't listen, since now he was looking at jail time for torching his boss's car and then some for stalking me. The boss, Mr. Freeman, didn't take too kindly to his car being barbecued. He canned Aaron and then slapped a lawsuit on him. And standing there, I couldn't help but feel a weight lift off my shoulders. Harper, honey, Grandma June called from the kitchen. You need anything? I shook my head, walking in to meet her. Grandma June had this way of slicing through nonsense. Gran, I'm good. But... I should have listened to you about Aaron. She was at the sink, and she turned around, drying her hands on a dish towel. Oh, honey. When will you learn to trust this gut? She patted her belly with a chuckle. I couldn't help but laugh. She always kept it so real. Can't argue with Grandma's gut, I agreed. Afterwards, I sat on the couch, flipping through a magazine but not really reading. It was just noise. Alone again, I felt surer than I had in months. This was the right move. Of course, there'd be more to deal with tomorrow, lawyers, unpacking the mess Aaron left, figuring out money stuff. But tonight, it was just me. I pulled my phone out and texted Mara, my best friend since forever. Free, finally. Wanna come over and crash my solo party? It didn't take long for her to fire back. On my way. Bringing pizza. The rest of the night was going to be easy. No drama, no Aaron. Just pizza, bad TV shows, and good company. I slipped into my comfiest sweatpants and pulled my hair back, finally able to breathe. The future might not look clear yet, but it looked a hell of a lot better than my past. I smiled to myself thinking about it. Uncomplicated, no strings attached, no more walking on eggshells. Yeah, this was how things were going to be from now on, starting right now with the new locks clicking into place. Freedom tasted a lot like pepperoni and cheese tonight, and that was just fine by me.